Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our Friday panel on our province rising to the top of the inflation pile. But first, looming deadlines.
We could sign a bad deal this afternoon, right? We could have signed a bad deal a year ago. We're not going to sign a bad deal. So it has to be a real deal.
The Prime Minister facing reporters this week with the countdown on to the July 1st deadline for a review of the North American Free Trade Deal. The same day, the Smith government is expected to submit a pipeline application to the Major Projects Office, all part of the Canada-Alberta MOU. Joining us now, Gary Marr, President and CEO of the Canada West Foundation, former MLA and Cabinet Minister, of course, a former representative for our province in Washington and in Asia. Mr. Marr, good to see you, sir. Welcome back.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
All right, well, let's start on the pipeline front. Well, there hasn't been much said about the application by either the provincial or the federal governments of late. There is considerable interest, anticipation of the July 1st timeline. How much of a make or break moment do you expect this to be where the future of the MOU is concerned?
I expect that there's going to be an announcement on July the 1st, and I think that it is the culmination of a lot of work on the part of Premier Smith and the Prime Minister, and I might add the Premier of British Columbia as well. There were a number of barriers to moving forward on this kind of project, including finding a proponent that would support it, but there may be some solution sets as some of the barriers have been knocked down over the previous months of negotiations with two provincial governments and the federal government. And I wouldn't be surprised to see if there was an entry of financing that comes from a proponent that is from outside of Canada. That wouldn't surprise me at all. What remains to be seen is how you deal with the issue of the industrial carbon tax is one, and two, pathways. The Prime Minister is insistent that pathways be part of this, and we'll have to see what kind of a financing arrangement may or perhaps may not have been done with respect to the $15 to $20 billion that pathways would require, and what the timeline of it is going to be. Perhaps they stretch it out over a longer period of time, and that may be the solution to dealing with that sticky issue. But I am expecting to see an announcement on the July 1st deadline.
Okay, well, now today marks the one-year anniversary of the Building Canada Act, legislation giving the federal government sweeping powers to approve major projects of national interest. How much progress do you see being made these past 12 months, especially where our province is concerned?
I think that the read that I have from people out in industry is that they are appreciative of the ambition of the Prime Minister. They're appreciative of the messaging that he's put out there. Most recently, three major projects that he wants to have go forward, two of them in the Arctic being highways, and one in Northern Ontario being a repository for spent nuclear waste. But there remains to be done the action part of it. And that's the part that I think Albertans are waiting for, to actually see work getting started on projects that have been deemed to be in the national interests. And so that's something that people continue to wait for.
Okay, so anticipating then that a pipeline application will go ahead, will be delivered on the 1st of July. That means, right now we're still a week away from the start of Stampede. The PMO has a new senior advisor in Morgan Breitkreutz on Alberta dynamics, be that the MOU or the October referendum. What are you watching for where relations are concerned now between these two levels of government?
Look, I think that the appointment of Morgan Breitkreutz is a good one. I think that he'll need a lot of help, and certainly there are many people that are going to be willing to work with Morgan, but he being from Alberta, I think has a reasonably good understanding of the West in general and Alberta in particular. He recently was the chief of staff to Minister Oślewski, who's from Edmonton, and I think that this is it's a good sign. And I would say this: the Stampede has always been a remarkable event. For 10 days of the Stampede, Calgary becomes both the political and the business center of Canada. A lot of people from outside of Alberta don't really understand that, but it is a gathering of people that will come from all over Canada, be it premiers, be it the Prime Minister, be it members of his cabinet. It's going to be an interesting time to watch the political dynamics, because I also expect that people from throughout Alberta that may be part of the pro-separatist group may descend upon the city as well and make their presence known. And then finally, the business opportunities and the networking that goes on is pretty extraordinary. It's amazing how many deals get signed in a rodeo suite by people that are coming from all over in order to be in the city of Calgary at that time. So it's always been a great event for both politicians to gather and meet, and for businesses to gather and meet. But I think that what's going on most recently on both the referendum front and on the pipeline front and on the CUSMA front are all coming to a head for these 10 days of the Calgary Stampede, and hopefully good things can emerge from it.
All right. Well, and on that note, let's close out the conversation on that CUSMA front. We heard the clip of the PM a moment ago about landing a deal. Pete Hoekstra, U.S. ambassador to Canada, telling CTV News earlier this week that they aren't anywhere close to announcing any type of framework or interim agreement. What will you be watching for July 1st when Canadian, Mexican, and American officials conduct that trilateral meeting to review the agreement?
I think what needs to be understood in all of this is that there is a great deal of integration of our three economies. And that is what gives Canada and Mexico leverage vis-a-vis the United States. There are a number of trade irritants among and between these three trading nations. And I think that, the people that are on the Canadian negotiating team have done much to knock down some of those trade irritants, but many still remain to be dealt with. And so this is what Pete Hoekstra, the ambassador of the United States to Canada, has referred to. But I believe that Ms. Charette and Minister LeBlanc and a whole host of people that are supporting them are making real progress with Jameson Greer, the USTR, and the negotiating side for the Americans. And there's no magic to July the 1st in this particular. I expect that the negotiations will continue beyond July the 1st. And, I think that Ambassador Hoekstra has laid out a pretty compelling lesson for Canadians. And that is that negotiations are not being done really in the traditional sense of diplomats and trade representatives negotiating. The president is a businessman, and so it's more like a business transaction to him than it is like a national trade negotiation in the traditional sense. And so when Ambassador Hoekstra says, you got to stop saying we have to have your oil, when you ask him, what does that mean? He'll say, well, look, Canada used to make up 11% of oil imports to the U.S. Now it's about 60%. So we don't need your oil. We can drill our own. We can get it from Venezuela. We can get it from Mexico. But there's a reason why Canada has gone from 11% to 60%. And that's because while you're not the only place to get our oil, you're the best place to get our oil. And so we need to make the business case as to why that is so and make that clear to the president. And so rather than saying, Mr. President, you need our oil, we should be making case, Mr. President, this is why we're great partners and why it's good for us and it's good for you. Make it a business case, not a traditional trade negotiation case.
All right. We're out of time, Gary. We have to leave it there. As always, appreciate your time. Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Gary Marr, President and CEO of the Canada West Foundation. From infrastructure funding challenges to the punch of inflation, World Cup fever on home soil, and cranking up O Canada. Our Primetime This Week panel is in, and joining us this evening, Danielle Paradis, freelance writer and associate professor of journalism at MacEwan University, and Marty Chan, award-winning author, playwright, and writer. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with difficult decisions facing many municipalities in our province, decisions that often focus on decades-old infrastructure that either needs to be maintained or replaced.
It's not just aquatic facilities, it's aging recreation centers, it's aging older city buildings, it's roadways, it's bridges.
In Edmonton's case, while staff say much of the city's infrastructure inventory is in acceptable condition, the gap between needed versus possible maintenance over the next 4 years, nearly $3 billion.
We aren't able to continue to maintain investing ideal amounts in our infrastructure renewal. And so going forward, we do have risks that our overall state of condition of infrastructure is going to start to decline.
City staff have now quantified renewal deficits in every infrastructure category, prioritizing projects for council consideration. Case in point, of the 98 arterial roads in need of renewal, staff recommend funding 40, as it would cost an extra $266 million to pay for every project. It's a situation prompting some councillors to speak out.
You can't keep building 12,000 kilometers of roads and then wonder why they're in poor shape.
I'm becoming increasingly frustrated with the decisions of my colleagues related to growth and prioritizing growth projects.
The Alberta government, meanwhile, assembling a council of municipal and industry leaders to come up with new ways of funding infrastructure.
There could be any number of tools that may or may not fit for the flexibility and the cost of capital for a project. I want to give municipalities more tools so that they're not stuck with taxes as one of the only avenues or levies, off-site levies.
The minister says considerations could include P3, public-private models, tax incremental financing, and pooling costs across municipalities. Danielle, let's start right there. Where do you weigh in on driving an infrastructure funding conversation that does not involve municipalities raising taxes?
Yeah, if raising taxes is off the table, and I understand as somebody who got a hefty tax bill this year as well, that there's a hesitation there. But if you remove that, then you're left with private-public funding, often, or P3s, as your speaker mentioned there, which is also not opportune. We are dealing with infrastructure, we're dealing with a public good, we're dealing with something that may not be profitable in the traditional sense, and that's sort of what our tax system is designed to develop. So we're dealing with this legacy of the 1960s centennial building boom that has created a lot of buildings and not a lot of funding to deal with it. There's rink shortages, pool shortages, and there's going to be people who are asking for these services. So I wouldn't be so quick to write off taxes.
Marty, why do you feel so many municipalities are in the position of struggling to sufficiently fund infrastructure needs? And is there a fix that will satisfy all involved?
I would say it's the Alberta way. We're seduced by big, wide open skies and lots of prairie land. So naturally, when people start looking at developing, they think about spreading out horizontally as opposed to building vertically. And unfortunately, there are land developers who go, yeah, we can make a lot of money if we start building new houses in new neighborhoods. And unfortunately, the municipalities have to keep up with that infrastructure. And my comparison is it's like an elastic band when you have a tax base. You wrap an elastic band around a stack of pencils. The more pencils you add, the weaker that elastic band gets, and eventually it's going to snap. And I think we're getting very close to that point. And I think City Council has to stop looking at spreading out and start looking at ways to fill in some of the older or mature neighborhoods and start thinking about going up in terms of building more housing, and so that the infrastructure that exists can actually help the most number of people as opposed to having things spread out all across the city.
All right, speaking of going up, it goes without saying, rapidly rising costs are having an impact on everyone, especially so in our province. Nationwide inflation being driven largely by fuel prices. They are 33% higher than last year. And with the cost of food jumping 4.3%, even kids are feeling the pinch.
Like, even at McDonald's right over there, like, I'm trying to buy a meal, it's like $20, which is like kind of crazy for me.
It's really bad. Yeah, it's just
It's not fun to think about as a kid.
Nationally, annualized inflation 3.2% in May, up from 2.8% in April, and Alberta is at the top of the pile with a 3.7% inflation jump, largely the result of one thing.
Auto insurance premiums have spiked, as we noted in the report, 26% year over year.
Car insurance, even it's gone up. We have to be around $350 a month.
Stripping out energy prices, national inflation was a modest 2.2%, which is what the Bank of Canada wants. But for average Canadians, it's still a grind.
The money runs out before the month does.
We're focusing on the wrong item. The issue is, why aren't our incomes keeping pace anymore with inflation? And that issue rests with productivity.
The solution to that, according to Moshe Lander, increased competition, something he says governments, both federal and provincial, have promised but failed to deliver. Marty, how surprised are you that Alberta's inflation rate rose above the national average last month? What's the signal being sent in that regard?
I'm not surprised. I mean, with the rising insurance rates, you know, the government has, or the provincial government has been fairly friendly to the insurance companies over the last few years in terms of making sure that insurance companies can make a lot from their premiums, yet Albertans can't sort of claim that back when they do have incidents. And so it's a tough haul, and I know we're feeling the ripple effects from what's going on between the orange pumpkin down south and Iraq. And I don't see that resolving anytime soon. So we're going to continue facing a lot of pressure. And all I'm going to say is it's not a good time to start being a vegan, because the price of vegetables and fruit are getting pretty sky high in the grocery stores.
They are indeed. Now, Danielle, what do you think it's going to take for inflation to loosen its grip on Albertans, Canadians alike?
Well, for fuel prices, because of the conflict in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz being closed, you're not likely to see fuel go down until at least October. Insurance would require a massive policy shift from the province, so unlikely to see that. This is a state where we're just seeing that perhaps the market isn't quite as free as we thought it would be. There's not a lot of relief coming. There's perhaps some tax relief. There's fuel costs that are gas taxes, but the federal government have already dropped them. So we're in a pinch for a long while, Michael. There's not an easy way out.
Yeah, I fear that may be the case. Okay, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, the Canadian embrace of World Cup fever and passionate Canadians preparing to belt it out on Canada Day. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. Team Canada still has life in the World Cup. Thousands in Calgary joining the chorus of Canadians cheering on the nation's soccer team. And while Wednesday's 2-1 loss to the Swiss was disappointing, it isn't dampening spirits.
It's amazing. It's so fun. Like, I never thought I'd see this many people in one place for, like, especially Canada. You know, I feel like it speaks levels to, you know, football and how it's grown here in this country. Like, yeah, I feel like we've done really well, you know, building that foundation.
The Sea of Red is a sure sign. World Cup frenzy has taken hold, and Alberta retailers are struggling to keep Canadian merchandise in stock.
It's selling off the shelf. The whole country is pretty much sold out of a home jersey. There's still some away jerseys that are arriving daily. We've got names and numbers going on jerseys. Fans are picking their favorite players, getting them added to jerseys. It's just an absolute buzz.
Yeah, and enthusiasm for the game growing, with enrollment up about 10% annually. Marty, how swept up are you in the World Cup fever? Has it taken hold in your household?
Not much. I've never seen so many people excited about kicking balls. So it hasn't caught on with me, but I do appreciate the fact that people are getting behind it. I know it was about 2 or 3 months ago, there were some concerns about whether or not World Cup fever was going to take hold in Canada. I know that there were hotel owners who were complaining about the fact that their rooms were not booked up as much as they were hoping for the World Cup. And now to see people sort of catching on, it's good to see that. I guess it's got that sort of Olympic feel to it, where it takes a little while for people to realize it's going on, but once they see that their home team has a chance, everybody gets to rally behind the home team.
Yeah, and it really picks up pace. Danielle, between gains made by Team Canada in play and all that comes with co-hosting the World Cup. How much of a turning point do you see being made in the history of the game here at home?
Yeah, I think with the wins that we've seen, as well as with the changing population, there's a lot more people who just have a lot more interest in soccer or football, as they call it. And we're going to see more and more people interested in the game. You know, downtown Edmonton is seen as a hockey team, or as a hockey town, but you can see there's a lot of evidence that maybe we're a soccer town now too.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, keeping the theme of national pride going.
I am singing our anthem loud and proud.
Yeah, that's Vivian Davidson Castro, who calls Vancouver home 20 years after leaving Mexico to become a Canadian, and she'll be joining many others on Canada Day.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.
It's all part of a patriotic movement started last year by Vancouver Island's Jacqueline Slocum and her daughter, inviting all Canadians to sing "O Canada" at the same time.
This crosses partisan lines. We are Canadians. We love the country. We love who we are. And I think that the United States and all the world should know this.
Thousands are already answering the call, signing up at alltogethercanada.ca with a commitment to belt out "O Canada" at 11 a.m. Alberta time on July the 1st. Danielle, we saw "O Canada" being sung there in the video outside the legislature. How much patriotism do you expect will be expressed in our province July 1st?
I think that you will see a lot of expression of patriotism, sort of in answer to these much smaller separatist groups. So as we saw just a few weeks ago, Forever Canada had it outside the legislature where they were looking at renaming the street outside the town, outside of the legislature area. People showed up for that. A lot of people have been enthusiastic about Forever Canada. So I think you'll see quite a rise.
Marty, how are you looking on the significance of Canada Day this year as Albertans ponder the road ahead to voting on the issue of separation in the October referendum?
I think it's a great opportunity for those who believe in a unified Canada to really show their colors or sing their notes, as it were. And it's a reminder to people that there are a majority of Albertans who'd rather stay a part of Canada than to break away. And my one fervent hope is that the people in and around Sundre link arms and take the street and belt out "O Canada" to make up for the fiasco that happened with the cancellation of the parade there because of the separatists, and of course seeing the separatists slow roll down the streets of Sundre in their pickup trucks. It would be nice to have a counterpoint with people showing their heart and their hope for Canada to remain united.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how dynamics play out on Canada Day and which parties show up and who all is belting out "O Canada." We have to leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Hope you have an awesome weekend that's not too wet.
Thank you.
Take care.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News. It is about the Country Thunder Music Festival in Calgary being canceled, something we discussed on last night's show. Wild Wild West wants to know, how do you have fun without kids and families enjoying themselves? Colin thinks the cancellation has nothing to do with the noise bylaw. The festival is canceled because rain is forecasted for the entire weekend. Ken writes, just admit you couldn't sell enough tickets. James weighs in with this. Country Thunder sounds like a country thing, not a city one. If I were in charge, I'd move it out to the country. Probably some beautiful country locations to choose from. And Woodstock also thinks relocation would help, advising have it in a community that will go out of their way to make it successful. Maybe don't have it in Alberta at all. Remember, you can always have a say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. That is our program for tonight. Have a great evening and a great weekend, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.